If you are betting hitter fantasy score on PrizePicks or Underdog, I'd assume that you're probably betting the same exact way most people are. Pull up the season average, compare it to the line, and bet the gap. And that might be fine most nights, it'll get you close, but getting close is exactly the problem here. Because there is a reason that the same player can grade out completely differently in back-to-back nights despite their season average changing. And the problem isn't because of variance, it's because of something that I call the lineup window. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it on any of these props across either platform. Now sure, anybody can identify that there is clear value in Ohtani versus a pitcher who's getting his first MLB start, because that doesn't take a true system to see that there's actually incredible value in that play. But how does a 9-hole hitter on a random Tuesday consistently cash? That's the part that actually separates a better grinding out profits on these plays from someone who's actually just guessing. So in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what you can do to identify these hitter fantasy scores across PrizePicks and Underdog, and why there's so much value in these hitter fantasy scores every single day when betting on the MLB. Now, the first thing that we do need to discuss before actually jumping into these plays is the clear scoring difference between both PrizePicks and Underdog. Because for the most part, the scoring systems between these two books are nearly identical, but there are a few catch-ups, and they're actually what can separate hitting this line and not hitting this line. And the biggest difference here are actually the walks, stolen bases, and doubles. As you can see here on PrizePicks, you are only awarded 2 fantasy score for walks or hit by pitch, whereas on Underdog, you are actually awarded 3 points. And another difference is, again, on the doubles, you are only given 5 points for a double on PrizePicks, but on Underdog, you are given 6 points. So again, Underdog is rewarding hitters for not only walks, but also doubles. However, if you look at stolen bases, Underdog is only offering you 4 points for a stolen base, but for PrizePicks, you are given 5 points for a stolen base. Whereas everything else is priced the exact same way. Now that should raise a couple of red flags. Is why are these the only 3 things that are different between these two books? Well, it's simple. Those are the 3 things that are going to make or break a lot of these hitter fantasy scores. So let's go ahead and dive into exactly what makes these plays very profitable. And once I get over here to Outlier, the very first page that I actually look at is this props tab. Now, from here, you can see that we have over 18,000 props. And again, for this video, we are actually looking at the hitter fantasy score. So once we get over here to propositions, we're just gonna look at the fantasy score, and you see PP for PrizePicks and then UD for Underdog. So I'm just gonna look at PrizePicks for this scenario. Now, once I have all of this, now I'm actually gonna look at a hit rate, because now we have only 435 bets to look at, which is still a ton, but I wanna look at the hit rate from the last 5 where these hitters have at least an 80% hit rate. Now from there, we have dropped all the way down to 77 props, and that is very good. Now, I'm actually just gonna click into this first bet here, which is Xavier Edwards to go under 5.5 hitter fantasy score. And now again, I do want to preface that just by clicking into this, and just because I've seen that this hitter has gone under in 5 straight games, that doesn't mean that this is necessarily a lock. And even more so once I click into this and seeing that, okay, now this hitter's actually hit the under in 10 straight games, it's more important that we bet on the matchup and not necessarily the recent game logs. Because while this information is actually useful, we can add a little bit of context to these picks by using this game scripting feature and seeing exactly how this changes. So this is a home game for the Miami Marlins, and if we just select that, now all of a sudden, you can see that he's actually hit the over in 3 out of the last 10 games, but they're also favored, so let's just say that they won by at least even 1 run. So again, only hitting this last 3, but let's say that they cover the run line of 1.5, and let's say that they win by 2. Now all of a sudden, you can see that he's hit this over in 5 out of his last 10. So again, just by adding just the smallest bit of context to this matchup, it can greatly change how he's actually performed as a hitter. So now knowing that, let's go ahead and jump into this particular play and looking at the 3 things that we had mentioned earlier that can really make or break these plays. And again, that is base on balls, doubles, and stolen bases. So let's go ahead and jump into the first one, which is the base on balls. And before we do that, let's go ahead and just reset this game scripting feature, and then we'll go to the top to the BB, which is base on balls. Now, the thing to note here is there's not actually a ton of hitters who are drawing a walk every single game. So what is important to look at is actually the 2026 season and seeing, okay, how many walks is this hitter actually getting? And you can see here, he's actually drawing a ton of walks. And if you wanted to put a specific number to that, all you need to do is scroll down and you can see that here. Xavier Edwards, again, has had 326 attempts, and of those 326 attempts, 39 of them have resulted in base on balls, which is 12% of his at-bats. resulting in a walk, which is actually a decent number for an MLB hitter. And if you look at left-handed pitching, again, not a ton of opportunities. Of the 326 possible attempts, only 73 of them have come from left-handed pitching. 8 of those have resulted in a walk, which is roughly still about the same to his average, which is 11% of the time that he faces a left-handed batter, he is getting a walk. Now, it's not only the hitter's walk rate that we should be focusing on, it is also the opposing pitcher. And as you can see here, Alexander for the 2026 season, he is walking 7.5% of the batters that he's facing, but more importantly, versus right-handed batters, we see that actually go up quite a bit to 9.3%, meaning that in this game, not only are we seeing Xavier Edwards draw a good amount of walks, but we also are seeing a pitcher that's allowing more walks to right-handed batters, meaning that this matchup has a potential threat for Xavier Edwards to draw a walk in this game. Meaning that if you're taking the over, that's a good sign, but if you're taking the under, it might be something to worth note. Now, the next thing on this list is to actually look at a stolen base, because this is the single thing that can actually throw off a ton of slips, because it is either worth 4 fantasy score if you're betting on Underdog or 5 fantasy score if you're betting on PrizePicks. And again, it is important to know that stolen bases do not happen that often, but again, they can still crush your hitter fantasy score whether you're betting the over or the under. And again, as you can see here, in 12% of the games that Xavier Edwards has played in has resulted in him stealing a base. And if you wanted to put, again, an exact number on how many stolen bases, just scroll down and you can see here for the 2026 season, he's had 11 stolen bases, but also you should look at the caught stealing, meaning that 3 times that he's tried to steal a base, he's failed. So 14 total attempts for the 2026 season. Now, for left-handed pitching, 4 of these 11 attempts have come from left-handed pitching. 1 resulted in a caught stealing. So knowing this information, I don't see him as necessarily a potential threat for a stolen base in this game, but it could still obviously happen. So if we go back up to the top and knowing what we know, I think that there's a legit concern for a base on balls for Xavier Edwards, but a stolen base, not so much. Now, the next thing that we need to look at is obviously a double in this matchup. And as you can see here, he's had a double in 11 of the 76 games, which is 14% of the time, but it's not only doubles that we should necessarily be worried about, it's actually the extra base hits, which includes a double, a triple, and obviously a home run. And when we look at these key matchup stats over here on Outlier, again, looking at Xavier Edwards, he has a 286 average, but versus left-handed pitching, he has nearly a 300 average. Only one double versus left-handed pitching, 11 total on the year, but again, only 1 versus left-handed pitching. And a big reason for that, again, is the possible attempts. Only 73 total attempts, meaning that nearly 250 have come from right-handed batters. However, all of these percentages matter, right? So versus left-handed pitching, 26.3% of his hits are extra base hits, 32% are hard hit, and then roughly 22% are line drives, which are all very high percentages and something to consider when betting on extra base hits. Now, when we look at the pitcher, this is actually a glaring difference when we're looking at this extra base hit percentage. For his 2026 season, 20% of the hits are extra base hits. However, when we look at that versus right-handed batters, that nearly doubles, jumps up to 35.3%, meaning that for Xavier Edwards, a double, a triple, or even a home run is a legit possibility in this game. Meaning that if I was considering to bet the under, I would actually stay away from it. Now, that is exactly how we found this bet, was by looking at these filters. Again, you can see that he's over his last 10, he's stayed under 100% of the time. Also, over his last 5, also stayed under 100% of the time. Now, that's how I found this bet. However, that's not necessarily how comfortable I feel taking it now. Because again, when we look at those 3 factors, which is the base on balls, I think that there is a real threat that he draws a walk in this game. A stolen base, I think it's really a long shot that that could happen. But an extra base hit, also a long shot that it happens, but I still really like the opportunity in this matchup. So now that we've checked the 3 things that could actually make or break this slip, the last thing that we actually need to check is the hits, runs, and RBI potential. And the first thing that I actually look at once I click onto the screen is actually the odds. And so all I do is go to this odds screen, and the 2 books that I really care about are Novig and DraftKings. I obviously care about FanDuel as well, but you would be surprised with how little markets FanDuel offers for hits, runs, and RBIs. So when I look at these two, minus 127 and minus 133 for him to go over a hit, run, RBI. RBI. And when you think about it, the most likely scenario that happens from here is either an RBI single, or maybe he hits a single and also gets driven in from a run. And if either of those were to happen, that results in a 5 fantasy score on either PrizePicks or Underdog. Which, sure, yes, that still gives you the under 5.5 on either of those two books. But again, that's exactly why it is important to always check the base on balls in that matchup, as well as the stolen bases and the potential for an extra base hit. So now that we know that the books are actually favoriting this over 1.5, we actually need to start dissecting how this play actually looks. And when we look here at this opposing pitcher, you can see here that this whip rate is 1.48. And again, what a whip is walks plus hits per innings pitched, meaning that this guy is nearly averaging, or he is averaging 1.5 walks plus hits per innings pitched. And just for reference, the league average is about 1.25 to 1.3. Well, he's coming in at nearly 1.5, which means he is very poor in this regard, which obviously is a good sign for us anytime we are trying to take this over 1.5 hits, runs, RBIs for Xavier Edwards, or a hitter fantasy score. But let's go ahead again and look at the key matchup stats when we scroll down here. And now again, what you'll see here is the average, the hits, the runs, and the RBIs, which again, all look really good for his matchups versus left-handed pitching. However, the number that I pay attention to more than anything is actually this weighted runs created plus. And all this is comparing this batter to the league average. Well, the league average is just the standard 100. So anything above 100, which as you can see here is 118.2, meaning that he is 18.2% better than the average hitter in the MLB. So when we look at him compared to hitters versus left-handed pitching, he is 40.3% better than all hitters in the MLB. And that is absolutely incredible. Again, making me feel more confident in this over. And when we look at the opposing pitcher, you can see his ERA nearly double versus right-handed batters. So everything is nearly seeming to lean over for this play, but there's actually a couple more things that I check. And the first thing that I would actually check here is I would go to the Miami lineup and I would look to see, okay, is there any history versus this opposing pitcher? These are all really small sample sizes, so I'm actually not going to look at that. I'm actually going to go over here to left-handed pitchers. And knowing this Miami team, batters that bat really close to Xavier Edwards are actually Liam Hicks and Otto Lopez. Well, you can see here, Liam Hicks not necessarily doing so good, has a 191 average versus left-handed pitching, but the number that really, and the player that really sticks out to me is actually Otto Lopez, batting .458. And why is this important? Well, when it comes to either driving in RBIs or having your teammates drive you in for a run, this matters because again, all of this is potential scoring that you can have on a fantasy score play. So having someone close to you that is also really successful in this matchup is always beneficial. So seeing this, it's another check mark for this over. Now, the last thing that I actually check, and I think that it should be checked every single time, is the weather in this particular matchup. So you can see here that again, the wind is blowing back at 9.2 miles an hour, 26% cloud cover, not a chance of precipitation, really 3% chance. So again, this is a retractable roof stadium, and it says that they can be closed with extreme heat, high humidity, or if rain is present. So when I look at this weather chart, it's nothing that really sticks out to me as saying I really shouldn't take this. This is a pretty neutral. However, when we look at this ballpark factor, you can see here ranks 22nd in all of MLB stadiums, meaning it is a very pitcher-friendly ballpark, giving a ballpark factor of 96. And if you wanted to click into this, you can see exactly where it ranks. You got to scroll all the way down to the bottom. Lone Depot Park, again, ranks 22 out of the all 30 stadiums. But again, he's a right-handed batter. So if you look at that, it doesn't change too much, still at 22 out of the 30 stadiums. So this is maybe the one thing that is unfavorable in this matchup is really just the ballpark factor, but it's not anything that should necessarily deter me away from taking this because we have so many other supporting stats. Now, I know that this was a ton of information, but again, the biggest things that you should be checking are the walk rates, the potential for an extra base hit, especially for that double, and then also the stolen bases. And once you check all three of those and you feel like you have a clear direction, make sure to look at the hits, runs, RBIs to see if that further validates whichever way you are leaning. So anyways, after watching this video, if you have any questions about this process, be sure to drop those down in the comments below and we'll be getting back to you as soon as possible. Anyways, best of luck betting out there, and I will see y'all in the next one.